All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So, Monique and Steve Harvey. A few of you wanted to know what my 2 cents on everything was. I saw the clips. I saw the show. If you don't know, Monique went on the Steve Harvey show and she was talking about her experience with Hollywood and how she was blacklisted and everything going on with the Netflix deal and this, that, and the third. And they kind of get into a debate about how Monique should have handled the situation. Steve is kind of on the lane where he's saying, you know, you got to use diplomacy and you got to do things with love and you got to think about how you say things because you don't want to burn too many bridges and this, that, and the third. And you got to think about all the people that are depending on you. And pretty much he's telling her she's going to have to walk on eggshells for white people in order to make it in this industry. And she should apologize to all the people that she pissed off. And then on her side of the seesaw, it's kind of like, well, I've contributed this much to the industry in 20 years, and I know what I'm worth, and I shouldn't have to walk on eggshells to get in the doors and everything like that. And on top of that, all of you, that's including people like Steve Harvey, Oprah, William Packard, Lee Daniels, Tyler Perry, you know, you all have seen my side and you recognize that I'm right in what it is that I'm saying, but you all are too afraid to kind of jump out and support me, and you only want to support me from behind closed doors. But then when you get out in the public, it's all about how to play the game. And so people are kind of on either side, kind of fighting over who is right. And then there came the argument of integrity versus what you will do for money. And in my opinion, the bigger issue is this. This is just showing us that when it comes to Hollywood, black people don't own anything. And when you don't own anything, you don't get to call any shots. And you unfortunately do get sucked into a space where you have to play that game, which I think is some BS. And Monique, I think, recognizes it that way. That's why she's going against the status quo. Hollywood has a status quo. And when you go against it, they shut you down. That's how it's always been. And I think you have to question somebody like Steve Harvey. Like somebody like Steve Harvey, who has a daytime talk show on a major network, hosts Family Feud, has the radio show, hosts what, the Miss World, Miss whatever pageant, the pageant. He has like 50,000 endeavors. You have to think, for a black entertainer in Hollywood to become that big, how many white people have you kept comfortable? That's just my question, because it's very rare that anybody who goes against the status quo or anybody who really stands for a whole lot makes it that far in Hollywood. Hollywood doesn't want you to have too much of an opinion. That's why I think Kevin Hart was somebody who became so big. Not because he was funny. I mean, he was funny depending on what you're into. But Kevin Hart was always unproblematic because he was never going to shake the table. He was never going to discuss politics. He was never going to stand for anything. He was always going to go with the flow, and his purpose was, I just want to make people laugh. And so that got him into this big giant empire. Now he finally opened his mouth and said his 2 cents about something, and it's finally coming and it's gotten him caught up. But you have to think, his rise to everything that was, you know, going on as far as his career, he never shook the table. He always played it safe. He just wanted to make everybody laugh. He stayed out of politics. He stayed out of social issues. He stayed out of a lot of things. If he ever said anything, it was such a nice, polished, diplomatic, easy come, easy go kind of response. People couldn't even get mad at him. You didn't really know where he stood on things. And so I think in Hollywood, that's how it's always been for black folks. It's always been, if you want to really, really make it, then you have to be as super unproblematic as possible. Because the minute you start asserting too much of your blackness, we got to shut you down. Hollywood has always been that way. And it's because, one, like I said, unfortunately, we don't own anything. People kept trying to say, oh, you know, like Tyler Perry has the production studio and Oprah has own network, and Lee Daniels is doing what he has. William Packard has his production company, and look what Steve Harvey has. But my thing is this: at the end of the day, as great as it is that they have all of that, they're all still going to the same building Monique is going to. The same building Monique is going to go cuss people out and say, where's my money? You know, they're at the same building, they just on a higher floor. You know, and at this point, I don't even think Monique can get a lobby anymore. They're like, you security. But, you know what I mean? Like, they don't own as much as we think either. And so you have to think about Hollywood. When it comes to Hollywood, and when I'm saying Hollywood, I'm specifically speaking white executives, white producers, white everybody who wants the show. Because Hollywood is a very white industry, okay? Hollywood is like, you know, for the few success that we see, like, Hollywood is not really something that is saturated in black anything. And that's a conversation about capitalism and everything else anyway. But when you're talking about Hollywood, Hollywood had a whole half-century head start before black people even had a shot at owning anything or calling any shots. When you're talking about Hollywood, they built an entire industry in which we were not even welcome to be a part of. Yeah, Hattie McDaniel had an Oscar. You know, yeah, Sidney Poitier could do a little something here and there. Yeah, Dorothy Dandridge got a role or two. You know, there were a few people who got a little piece of something here and there. But that was a speck of pepper in a bowl of salt. So if you take a whole big giant bowl of salt and, you know, put a few specks of pepper in there, on the surface, you can see it. But when you put your hand in there and stir that bowl, can you find the pepper? Okay, that was Hollywood until almost the 1960s, 1970s. And then we started getting a few elements of placement. You know what I mean? And as the 80s and the 90s came, okay, we saw more black directors. We saw more black producers. We saw more black films making it to the mainstream. Awesome. But because of that head start that Hollywood has always had in relation to where white execs and everybody else was in comparison to black people who were just trying to get in the door. And mind you, that getting in the door is really a conversation around talent. Not even those who wanted to be the executives. Not even those who wanted to actually own the companies. You know what I mean? By the time we got to that, by the time we got to them 70s, those 80s, those 90s, you had these big multi-billion-dollar corporations and distribution companies and everything like that. And so now, unfortunately, they get to call the shots on how Hollywood works. And so everybody else who's coming in, it's like, there's the game to play, go ahead and play it. And if you don't want to play that game and you try to go by your own rules, yeah, you can have some success, but you're not going to have Steve Harvey's success. You're not going to get the Kevin Hart success. You're not going to get the Lee Daniels success. And let me tell you, just to prove my point, I'll always remember when the Monique Lee Daniels stuff was first going down, or when it first reemerged, because nobody knew about the blacklisting until about 2014, 2015, when it started becoming an item. And so Monique had already been doing the whole Lee Daniels thing. This is before Netflix. And so all that was going on. Lee Daniels goes on, I want to say he was on Don Lemon, of all people. And mind you, this is when Don Lemon was still tripping, and this is when he was still doing a whole bunch of anti-black stuff over at CNN. I don't know what kind of woke juice he drunk lately, but he done flipped sides and he done found himself temporarily. But Lee Daniels goes on the show and he's like, well, the way that Monique handled everything, it was reverse racism. I said, did this Negro go on national reverse racism? And so let's go back to Monique's situation with Precious. Lee Daniels does Precious and everything, and he gets the investments and everything, and Tyler Perry and all of them support Oprah and all of them love it, because remember, it was from the book Push. And so all of that happens. Monique gets $50,000 to do the film. The film, it climbs the ladder through all of the festivals. It gets all this acclaim. It finally gets a larger theatrical release. She gets an Oscar. Or even before the Oscar, you know, the movie's doing well, they want to go push it over in Europe and everything like that. And, you know, they're saying, okay, Monique, you've met all of the requirements for the studio. That's great, but we would love for you to go to Europe and push the movie even more. And she's like, okay, cool, but, you know, I just had some twins, and I got a young son that's going to be going to college soon, so, like, how does that work? Are y'all paying me to go over there? Because, you know, hell, I did all this campaigning in the U.S. I would like to live my life. And they're saying, okay, yeah, but we won't pay you, but, you know, it'll give you a better shot for the Oscar. It'll give you a better shot for all of this and all of that. And she kind of was like, well, I don't, you know, I'm good. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'd rather stay home and take care of my family. I don't want to go to Europe, and I don't want, because they wanted her to pay her way and do all that stuff anyway. And then turns out that was the blacklisting right there. She said no to the execs. They said, okay, we'll show you. And then the only reason Monique even knew she was blacklisted is because Lee Daniels called her and said, you didn't play the game correctly. You didn't play the cards right. You didn't do what they said. And then it just went on from there, and so on and so on. But it just goes back to my main point. They don't own anything. We're in a capacity where, yeah, we're the talent, but again, like, Hollywood right now is like a game of Monopoly. And when you talk about what black folks own, if you remember what's on a traditional Monopoly board, because, you know, they didn't change it a million times, black folks own like Reading Railroad and Shortline Railroad, and that's about it. And maybe one of like the little purple, what was that, Baltic Avenue? The purple one, that's about it. The rest of the board, I mean, Hollywood, all the execs and the distribution companies, they own the rest of that crap, and they got hotels and all the property. So yes, you can go around and collect your $200, and you know, when somebody lands on your property, yeah, you get your $25, but every other property you land on, you're paying out the hotel, you're paying this, you're paying that. That's symbolic of how Hollywood works. We don't call the shots in anything in Hollywood because, like I said, we just don't own a lot. And I think what the solution is all of those black elite and all those who have made enough to actually sustain themselves where they never have to work again, they need to put their funds together and invest in multiple, and I say multiple, black major distribution companies as well as production companies. It's great that Tyler Perry has a production company. It's great that William Packard has a production company. But when it comes to distribution, they have to get suckered into the same game as everybody else. So when you're talking about black movies and everything like that, one of the biggest setbacks that black film directors face is that they never can get the same distribution as white films. Happens all the time. Even Tyler Perry, who for some would say right now is probably one of the biggest ones out there that puts out black content, whether you like it or not, you know, he struggles to get his films released in the same amount of theaters as the average white film. The average white film is released in 3,000 theaters. Tyler Perry fights and claws, and on a good day, he can get into about 2,400, 2,500. So even if you look at like a movie like Madea Goes to Jail, which I think made $90 million. Initially, The film opened in about 2,070 theaters. You know, prime example, can we take a flashback? Let's go back and visit the movie The Wood. I'm going to try to pull up the diagram here. So, by the way, one of the coolest things, you can always go look right on Box Office Mojo and you can see everything that's on, you know, the movie sites when it comes to what a movie makes and how, you know, a movie operates. So I'm going to use the movie The Wood, only because that was one of my favorite movies as a kid. So, we're going to flash back to the week of July 23rd, 1999. All right? I had just moved back from Italy. And so, The Wood drops. When it debuted, it came out at number 6. Now, let's shift over here. I'm trying to have this diagram, so hopefully I'm able to show this the same way I'm talking about it. If you look on the right side, it shows you the number of theaters a movie is released in. It shows you how much they made per screen or per theater. It shows you what they made overall, and it shows you the budget. If you look at The Wood, right now, so in their second week, they made about $4.8 million. Okay, not bad for a second week. Now, look at the theater screens that it showed on. If you see that there's a hash mark next to it, meaning that there was no change. It didn't go up or it didn't go down. This is the second week. It was in 1,191 theaters, which means when the movie came out, it only opened in about 1,200 theaters. All right? And then when you look at what it made on average, it made about $4,048 per screen. Now, if you look, right now it has the lowest theater count, but when you're looking at the average that it made per screen, it's higher than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 films that are ahead of it in the box office. Okay, that's how Hollywood screws over a lot of black films. And then they'll say, oh, you know what? Your film just didn't quite hit the mark. This is why we can't invest in it. And this is why you have so many black filmmakers who have to fight and claw to get their movies made. Anybody who works in film can tell you right now, the hardest thing about getting your film off the ground is getting the financing for it. And Hollywood is very fickle about how they will support black films. A lot, because one, we're almost limited to what we can come out with. You can come out with the hopeless romantic comedy that's usually starring a black woman who has a crappy time finding a man because she just has too much going on. You can do that movie. You can do the drug lord, kill him up, shoot him up movie. You can do the movie, The Rags to Riches, where you have to put in the Great White Hope film. Nothing like watching that Jesse Owens film. That crap was just enraging to watch. They just made Jesse Owens look like he was stupid. I don't know if I could do it. All you gotta do is run. So, you know, there's that kind of film. Then there's the black trauma film, the scorned black woman who has the terrible black man. You know, those are pretty much your options at the moment. You can't do no black sci-fi. You can't do no black fantasy. Hollywood doesn't let black anything experiment when it comes to Hollywood. You can't experiment as a black screenwriter, as a black movie director. You don't get to experiment. You don't get to shake the table, but you need to go with what they know can sell. Oh, and of course, the other realm is the Tyler Perry vibe, the Tyler Perry Medea type films. Those are your 5 core areas when it comes to releasing black films. Everything else, if it does get out, it's not going to get a major release. So here's an example. Every year, there's usually an average of anywhere between about 550 and 700 movies that get a major theatrical release as far as being released in every major metropolitan city every year. Now, we're going to just use the number 600 to kind of play it fair and keep it in the middle. So on average, you have about 600 films that come out a year. When it comes to black films, it's not even close. 2011, there were 10 black films that came out as far as having a theatrical release. Of those 10 films, only 5 actually had a major release as far as not being limited. That's what you're up against. You know, that's what? Not even 1%? Or it's like, I think it's almost 2%. Like, 10 films out of 600. 10 films out of 600. So think of all of the films that were told no in favor of those 10. You know what I mean? And the jacked up part is, those other 590 films that came out, can you honestly say that they all met the same quality that those 10 would have had to make? Because the thing is, as a black filmmaker, as a black film producer, as a black screenwriter, as a black anything associated with any kind of black film, Hollywood holds the standard so much higher for a black film to get a major theatrical release. Unless you're doing some stereotypical raggedy type comedy that they're only going to release it in Detroit, Atlanta, DC, Baltimore, Philly, LA and Oakland, you know, then okay, we can flex a little bit more. But you know, Hollywood, it's a joke. And so going back to what I said when I said Monique got the 50,000 for Precious, think about the fact that somebody like Kendall Jenner can just make an Instagram post and get 250,000 per post, or Kylie Jenner or Kim Kardashian. You know what I mean? For somebody like a Kimberly Elise, who has to go out and fight and claw to get a movie role in which she's going to have to compete against Nia Long and Sanaa Lathan and Regina Hall and Regina King and Taraji and all of them, because, you know, they all fight for the same roles all the time, and they fight and claw. You got to think, the Kardashians/Jenners are getting more for their average Instagram post than the average black actress. that's a problem. And mind you, think it. Instagram post takes less than a minute to put together. You post your picture, put your little filter, put your hashtag, and post. You know what I mean? And so you have to think of that, like, that's just how different Hollywood is. And I think what kind of disturbed me with Steve Harvey's bit was when he said the line about, well, you know, if I shake the table and I lose everything, then the people who are depending on me, they lose it as well. And I was like, well, let's break that down. So let's just talk about your show. So everybody who's on that show is employed by NBC, not by Steve Harvey. So if Steve Harvey's show gets canceled, which I'm reading that they're already doing him kind of dirty anyway and trying to replace his stuff with Kelly Clarkson, all of those people are employed by NBC. So if they let those people go, when it comes to opportunities for new jobs at that network, they're already going to be kind of first tier to go with, because NBC would rather keep it in-house than go and get some random person like me from YouTube to come and work in there. And so, you know, there's an opportunity in that aspect. But then when you look at Steve Harvey again, Steve Harvey, like I said, has built an entire empire. He's worth millions upon millions upon millions. Worth so much to the point where he could lose everything today as far as all the career opportunities and never have to work another day in his life. His kids would never have to work another day in their life. The grandkids would never have to work. The great-grands would never have to work. The great-great-grands would never have to work. And so my question becomes, when you get to that element of success, when do you kind of shift gears and say, okay, now I want to build and create for other people? And I'm not going to take that away from him, because I do believe he does that. He does do the camp for the young men who, you know, to keep them out of trouble, which I think is commendable. That's dope. He does have additional opportunities and scholarships and stuff in his name. But the biggest thing is, what at this point do you have to lose by shaking the table or by somewhat giving that element of support to Monique? And again, it's not owed to her. He doesn't have to do it. But the fact that he would be on his talk show, which, let's talk about dynamics. It's very interesting to watch, you know, a black woman get yelled at, you know, well, not yelled at, but pretty much a black man cape for white Hollywood and tell a black woman why she has to walk on eggshells to make it, and then you have an audience that's majority white folks clapping. I said, that's a weird dynamic to witness there. Oh, okay. All right. But again, with him just saying the whole bit about losing everything and this, that, and the third, I was like, you are so wealthy at this point. If you were to lose everything, you'd still be fine, and you could still build everything you want, because of course it takes money to make money. He has enough to do whatever he wants at this point. He has enough to do pretty much anything he aspires to do if he wants to do it. And there's a lot of other people in Hollywood who have that as well. And that's why I'm saying people like Steve Harvey and some of these other ones who have, you know, what is it, 6, 7, 8, 9 figures just sitting around in their bank accounts, or at least in their net worth and in investments and everything else like that. I need more of them to invest together to build more. The issue with Hollywood is because black folks don't own anything in it, because they're not calling the shots. That's why there's always going to be that element of walking on eggshells. And I think that's sad. Like, prime example, I look at when Spike Lee was trying to do the Malcolm X film. Studio wouldn't give him any more money. They're like, one, we already didn't want to do this film, because one, who wants to do a film on Malcolm X? Because of course, this is during a time where the narrative about him was still very negative. They didn't want to do a film on that at all. And so they gave Spike a very slim budget. He had to go and fundraise to get the rest of the film, you know, taken care of. And it got to the point where other black actors and public figures had to jump in and help donate. So you had people like Bill Cosby and Janet Jackson and all of them writing checks to help finance the film. You know what I mean? It just goes to show you what many black directors are up against in Hollywood. Have to fight and claw. And so it's just extremely disappointing. And again, until we get in a position of ownership, and when I say ownership, I'm saying not only are you owning the production companies, we're getting there. Tyler Perry has his, William Packard has his, a few others have theirs. I'll even shout out people like Vivica A. Fox who do theirs on a more smaller scale and everything like that, and constantly put out content, and maybe it's not the $40 million films and everything like that, and maybe it's a smaller budget, but she's still constantly putting out content and building up enough where she can support herself and support other people and bring them in. You know, that's great. But when you're talking distribution, that's where we're lacking. When you're talking ownership of just TV networks, yeah, we got BET, but BET is run by white folks. TV One, from what I understand, last time I looked, is still, I don't even know if we own that anymore. You know what I mean? We don't really own anything. And so as long as you have everybody else in, you know, charge of as far as what it is you want to put out, you're never going to really be able to put out anything genuine. And that's why we criticize so many of the films that come out that are supposed to tell a black narrative, and then there's always all these extra problematic elements that are associated with it because we're not the ones in charge. And when you go and you send that script, or you go and you send whatever, you got to send it before this entire panel of people who are going to say, nope, I don't like that part, take that out. This is, can we put in just like a white hero somewhere in there? You know, this Jackie Robinson film was cool, but I don't think we're giving enough credit to his mentor / coach. Let's move him more up to almost be the star of the movie. Let's do that. Okay, that way it can be more comfortable for everybody to watch. And so that's the experience of being black in Hollywood. And mind you, I just lightly scratched the surface. I didn't even jump into everything we could jump into, or we'd be here for 5 more days. But it's funny how everything works full circle, because people get mad when I bring up like Jim Crow and systematic oppression and white supremacy and racism. But all of that ties full circle, because what you're seeing with Steve Harvey and Monique is the end result of that same origin. You know what I mean? When you have an entire industry that excluded an entire demographic of people for a good 50 years. And I'm not just talking about the positions of being the talent as far as playing the maid or being the person who could tap dance in the film. I'm talking about the aspect of also being in the production and the post-production and the directing and the screenwriting and doing the cinematography and the costume design and the casting director. Like, all of that left out 50 plus years. And so you end up getting generational and residual wealth that's built up that later forms these big giant corporations. The Lionsgate, you know, the 20th Century Fox, the Paramount, the Universal, all of these big giant corporations that pretty much they built their wealth on, you know, keeping other people out and making sure that they got a head start on everything else. And don't get me wrong, there's always been black distribution companies and film companies. Yes, you had the Lincoln Motion Picture Company that started in 1916. But the difference between something like the Lincoln, and that was by Oscar Michael. I always say his last name weird. It's spelled, you know, it has one of those little funky spellings at the end. But, you know, yes, it started in 1916. But the difference was, it wasn't backed by that same system that could help back something like an early Paramount or an early Fox Studios and everything like that. You know what I mean? Because they didn't have that wonderful element of backing by white supremacy to make sure that they could make it in a time like 1916 in this country. Not happening. So, you know, it's crazy. And mind you, that's not the only one. There's always been black distribution companies and production companies and everything like that. But a lot of them fold. They just don't have the backing. They don't have the support. And the part that really sucks is, like I said, in our experience as black people, we don't get the luxury to just live and go do things on our own for whatever we want to do. We always have to think collectively as a community, because again, we aren't backed by that same system. So in order to protect ourselves and ensure that the next generation has a little piece of something tangible, we always have to do everything from a communal aspect, which is why I say it would be great if you could have more of the black elite and those who are in Hollywood that make enough where they could still support themselves and never work again, start investing to actually build new corporations and new projects that create opportunity for other black people working in Hollywood. And so until that happens, you're going to continue to have these elements where you have somebody like a Steve Harvey telling Monique, don't shake the table too much. You know, you don't want to burn the wrong bridges because you don't want to mess up your money. And then you got somebody like Monique who's like, well, I don't even have nothing to begin with because I done lost everything I got. So you over here trying to hold on to everything you have and criticizing me for being pissed off at the fact that we've been in the game for the same amount of time and I have nothing to show for it. So, and I don't know if that part is necessarily true. I think she has something to show for it. But you know what I mean? Just when we're talking wealth, like, can we go there? The last big movie, other than that movie she did with the Christmas thing, the only other movie people remember she did recently was Blackbird. Blackbird made $78,000. It didn't even get a theater release. $78,000. That's where Monique is right now in Hollywood. You know what I mean? And so it's great that she has the Vegas residency, and it's great that doors are starting to open. But listen, that's the other thing. A lot of like black directors and producers, the way they have to cut corners to get these films put out, you know, goes back to what I said about them Kylie Jenner posts and everything like that. You know, it's rare for a lot of black entertainers, especially when it comes to like a Tyler Perry movie or Will Packer movie, to get a huge payout to do these films, because the film is already on a very limited budget already. They're already cutting corners. And then the films go and they make $100 million, and then the film company eats it up, and they don't even give that $100 million to invest in the next Will Packer film. They're like, okay, we're going to give you, you know, thank you for this $100 million you gave us. We're going to invest this in a new film that people who look like you are probably not even going to be involved with, just so you know. But thank you for keeping the company going. Your job is safe with us for a few more years. That's Hollywood. Anyway, share your 2 cents. I'm out. Subscribe.